Welcome to Radio Omnicore, your source for powerful stories and insights into authentic leadership. You're tuning into episode 53, where we're thrilled to kick off our brand new leadership series. Our first guest is none other than Vishal Haripersad, the managing director of Night Peace Sold Southern Africa. Vishal's leadership embodies the spirit of African excellence. In our discussion, we deep dive into what makes leadership truly impactful in the African context, exploring principles like Ubuntu, the importance of psychological safety, and why authenticity is more than just a buzzword. We also discuss retaining high performing talent and the idea that growth and learning are continuous journeys. So, whether you're a seasoned leader or looking to grow, you're in for a treat with this rich and human centered leadership conversation. I'm your host, Colleen McClintock, and I'm joined by my ever insightful co host, Hilton Rudnick. And now, here's our conversation with Vishal Haripersad. Welcome, Vishal. It's great to see you again and wonderful to have you in our studio to have a great conversation about leadership with Hilton.
Great, wonderful pleasure to be here and happy to have a chat.
Hi, thanks for setting this up. Very interested to hear about leadership in Vishal's unique position.
Yeah, that is true. Vishal, maybe just for the sake of, where you find yourself and the listeners and getting everyone up to speed, what's happening in your universe right now, 2024, going into November? What's been on your to-do list?
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. The to do list is supposed to get shorter as the year goes on, but it actually gets longer. So we are approaching the end of our year end, which is at the end of December. So there's a lot of activity going on within the business I run, trying to get deliverables completed, things out the door, but also looking forward into 2025 and beyond. I think a lot of people who on this annual cycle we on would have been starting their budgeting and looking at the strategies and how they need to be realigned for 2025 and beyond. And we very much in that process. So it's been top of mind recently, looking at the markets we operate in, looking at how those markets are expected to change in the near term, the medium term, and obviously speculating on the long term. And we're quite a diversified business. I'm an engineer. I run an engineering consulting business, which is global, but I concentrate on the Southern African market predominantly. And we very big into the mining space, we big into infrastructure, and we big into water and power. So those three sectors are very topical at the moment, both in our part of the world because of some PR you see where projects seem to be rolling out in South Africa mainly, but also across Southern Africa, infrastructure investment being key for economic growth and so on. Election cycles having come and gone recently in the last year or two. So it's been a big topic of discussion. So we're looking at that from a business point of view and having to analyze the market and analyze where we sit and analyze where we see opportunities. But also within the people space, it's no secret that there's been a lot of brain drain out of Southern Africa in the last
Mm.
5 to 10 years. We're not immune. I mean, we have highly skilled workers, of course, and these highly skilled workers are highly sought after globally. So we have had a few people leave in the last 2 or 3 years, mainly due to immigration, heading out to Australia, the UK, Canada, North America. So we've had to really try and balance how we look at retention in our business. So, how we view that. And I'll talk about that later a little bit more, but also how we look at attraction. I think it's equally important to acknowledge the fact that you are going to lose some people for lifestyle reasons or for, depending on the stage of their life and so on. But you also need to do everything you can to attract the talent that is here, but also attract talent from outside to come back. And it's
Mm.
been a great help, this whole GNU talk and the uprating of our economic growth prospects and all of that stuff in dispelling some of those notions globally that expats would have had who left South Africa, went abroad, that, things are going bad to worse. But also those foreigners who are thinking about taking advantage of this nomadic lifestyle that is the norm these days to try and attract some of them to work in our business. So those have been things that have been occupying our minds in the recent past. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's always on top of mind, but at this time of year, especially given where we are in our business cycle, it's especially important.
Maybe a useful place for us to start is to kind of get your version of leadership. And maybe a way of positioning it would be to say, like, if you were onboarding a new senior leader into KP and you were having a sit down with them and describing the most important things to you about leadership, how would that conversation look?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually every 6 to 8 weeks do a sit down and Teams combo call with all new hires into the firm. And I spend a lot of time talking, I mean, generally about the business, but they already know that because they would have researched us till they were blue in the face to before they interviewed, but more so about what our view on leadership is and what our expectations of our staff are and what the expectations of the company should be. And for me, leadership is very simple. It's authenticity, being authentic. And the one thing I found over the years leading the business and working in the industry, I have quite a few roles in the industry as well, is that people eventually begin to realize if you're just talking bullshit. Sorry, my language, pardon my language. Yeah, I know what I'm not allowed to say. Bullshit is like what politicians are accused of all the time. You say whatever you need to say to get whatever you need done at the time. And I've learned over the years that people can smell bullshit at whatever level they are, whether you're a new hire or whether you're a very senior leader. Oftentimes, the very senior people have left the previous employer because of the stench that they got
Mm.
where they were. And that authenticity actually applies in many ways. It applies in when you talk about strategy, you talk about mission, you talk about purpose, you talk about vision. It actually must be felt in the organization because it must be real. It must be meaningful in that the decisions you take are aligned with it. And I talk a lot about that. I talk about, from our version of leadership, is a lot about being authentic to who you are, but also knowing who you are. We spend a lot of time in our company, and we've used Omnicorp for that quite a bit in trying to get our people, and not just our senior leaders, but across the board, to actually understand who they are as people and then find the resonance with the company's values we talk about. And we talk very proudly, Hilton, about our African roots and our Africanness. I mean, we're 103 years old. We're the oldest consulting firm in South Africa. We are a global firm, but we started in Johannesburg in 1921. And as such, our African roots define a lot of the values that we talk about. We talk about Ubuntu as being a central tenet of our culture in the company, collaborative culture that we have. And we always talk about learning is a journey and a process that's not a lonely one. It is a collaborative one because we learn together about each other, about ourselves, but also about the work we do and the impact it has. And I'm very, very focused in talking about leadership in our business to get people to understand the consequences of what we do and get them to understand about the big picture about what we do. No matter whether you're a graduate new hire or whether you're a very senior person who's been in the game for 40 or 50 years, you have to understand that before you actually do the work. Because with that understanding, the work that we do, which is very important, I mean, we have a lot of responsibility as engineers. Literally, you have people's lives in your hands with what you design. You've got to understand that the work that we do as an employee of KP, but as an engineer generally, has consequences, and that must inform how you approach what you do. I sound like I've given you a wishy washy answer, but that's because leadership to me is not in a box. It's about
Mhm.
who you are, and it's about how what you do aligns consistently with who you are. And who you are must then resonate with who you work with and the company you work within. Because if there's no synergy between your value and the company's value, there's always going to be this gap. And people call that a lack of trust in the leaders, lack of understanding of where you're going. Actually, it is a lack of understanding of who you are, a lack of appreciation of where you're working and how the two resonate. That's not to say we've got it right. I mean, geez, I wish we had it right. It's a journey. We probably do as much as anyone else does in trying to get it right, but we have found that certain people who've joined us don't resonate with that. They don't resonate with our high performance culture. They don't resonate with our talk about Ubuntu and African excellence and being proud of those values. And they leave because, and without citing examples, they want something easier. They want something where it's less brain damage. You just come to work, you do what you're told to do, and you go home. And we say an extension of you needs to be who you are at work, not a separate person. You need to be the same person at home that you are at the office. And you need to be authentic to that so that you're able to be consistent with the decisions you make and the values you apply in reaching the outcome. So, yeah, I don't know if I've answered the question, but in many ways, that is the philosophy we talk about all the time when we talk about leadership. And then it evolves from there. And then you talk about the values, trust, professionalism, and consistency, and so on.
Thank you. Yeah.
I wanted to know the trickiness that you face as a leadership team and as the CEO, and that is balancing leading with purpose versus this driving for results. How do you balance those two? Because they're both important, but I get the sense that you've been incredibly successful. Everyone can see that in all the various awards and posts and the amazing results you're getting. But something you're doing underlying that is driving purpose. And how do you get that right?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time pondering that point as a leadership team because ultimately, no matter how great people think you are, if it doesn't translate into measurable performance that impacts your shareholders, impacts your staff, and ultimately impacts the growth of the business, it doesn't have as powerful a meaning or doesn't have as much resonance. We've turned the conversation here into being that success is a consequence of living our values right. It isn't the reason. Profit isn't the reason we do what we do. But if we do what we do consistently and we stay aligned with our principles, which are not airy fairy, I mean, we are not an NGO. We are not trying to just build things for the hell of it. But if we stay consistent with that, we have really focused on getting the results to become a consequence of what we do. And I found the best recipe for that success has been to get alignment with the leadership team along that line, to get everyone who has a different idea of how we get to the destination. And that's fine. I want that. I don't want everyone sort of blindly following everything without having their own points of view, expressing it. But when you get everyone aligned with the destination, aligned with where we want to go, and you give freedom to people to pursue their own, within the boundaries, their own approach to getting there, but within our value system and within our culture that we've defined, you allow more chances for success to come as opposed to just narrowing it down to one or two channels. And in our business, because what we do is so important and because we work in highly sensitive industries and highly important industries, public infrastructure, mining industry, and so on, it's so important that there's certain things that everybody aligns to, but also you allow a little bit of creativity for people to adjust the approach because different markets have different constraints and different realities. I have operations across Southern Africa. So Zambia is different to the DRC, which is different to Namibia, different to Botswana, different to Eswatini, different to South Africa. The culture is different, the history is different, the way people get to define success is different in terms of the journey, but the ultimate objective is the same. And the ultimate consistent understanding of where we're trying to go is very much aligned. And that's been a lot of work that we've put in, Colleen, over the last, I would say, 7 or 8 years. Some of it having been part of the journey with us as Omnicore. We've had that idea of trying to get everyone to be a best version of themselves, but then align everybody with the overall goal and objective and vision, create some guardrails within which people can operate, but there's certain boundaries because of the high degree of importance of what we do and the sensitivity around it, then give people the freedom to go out there and pursue their own way of approaching it. Because I don't hold the view that I have all the answers or that one person has all the approaches, nailed down and it's my way or the highway. But at the same time, I'm only okay with people pursuing their individual approaches to things if they aligned with where we're trying to go and our value system and our culture and so on. That I found has allowed us then to balance those two things you mentioned, balance the driving of the purpose, but at the same time keeping a very close eye on our performance because we watch that very carefully. And what I found over time is that they begin to align much better than if you focus on one or the other. And that
Mm.
consistency, alignment has got us to enjoy some of the success that you're talking about. But we don't think we're successful, by the way. We think we are just on the journey. There's a long way to go.
So, Vishal, one of the things that fascinates me in your world in particular is this kind of transition between being an amazing engineer and then becoming a manager or a leader. And I remember a book I read in the I don't know, 70s or 80s called The Peter Principle, which had that idea that people rise to a level of incompetence. They're like fantastic technically, and then you put them in charge of people and everything falls apart. And I wonder how you manage, do you have a different stream for people who are just like only ever going to be great engineers and not become leaders? Or how do you work with that tension in your business?
Yeah, I think all service oriented businesses have that challenge, Hilton. And more so in the consulting engineering industry, it's something we've all grappled with, especially as people are promoted. And you are right. I've seen examples of that in the past where people are promoted to the level of incompetence purely for be based on seniority or tenure in the business. I won't lie, it is a challenge. I guess it really comes down to us trying to understand what really drives individuals on the inside, the getting to understand what their true strengths and developmental areas are, and getting to understand what really resonates with individuals in terms of the value system. It is a fallacy that you can either be good in one or the other. You can be a great engineer and be a good people manager. You can be a good people manager, learn to be technically astute. You can go between technical fields within the engineering game. You can be a water engineer for 20 years and then become a very good roads engineer. So there's very wide opportunities within that stream. But it is about the people at the end of the day. And it is about the character and the makeup and the personality of the individuals that you choose to put into those leadership positions. We are very careful with whom we put into those positions. And we take our time by putting people through developmental opportunities, training, guidance, mentorship before we actually put them into those positions of senior leadership, as opposed to take the attribute in one and assume automatically they're going to be as good doing the other. But when you see something in someone, right, you see that spark in someone, more often than not, that spark is potential that can be realized. You just got to understand how to unlock it, now to uncover it. And that's something I think we've gotten very good at within the organization, not just here, but globally, is that we spend a lot of time looking at our team and looking for those sparks in people and trying to identify that and then trying to figure out how to unlock it. There's a lot of us work where we do collaborative stuff. There's a lot of them work. Put a lot of emphasis on the individual also when they're told about the opportunity that exists for them, put them in a position where they need to develop themselves as well. And that is part of what we've done at the very senior level, where we're trying to get people to become aware of who they are, aware of what drives their conscious and unconscious decision making, but also become more aware of what their potential really is. Because unfortunately, in this part of the world, people's potential more often than not has been what others have defined it for them. Whether that's cultural, whether that's historical, whether that's just, I don't know. That has been what I've encountered to be the biggest stumbling block to getting people to really live up to their full potential. It's them defining it based on what others have told them. So in KP, we try to create a culture, and it's not all great. It does have downsides, but generally try and create a culture where you are free to become the best version of yourself, but that comes by being under pressure, and it comes by having high expectations of you, which we don't mince our words about. When you join KP, this is a high performance firm. If you want to come and clock in, clock out 9 to 5, you're probably not going to enjoy it. But if you want to be driven, you want to motivate and develop yourself and rise above what the level of your peers in the marketplace would be fairly quickly, this is the right place for you. Doesn't mean we chew people up and spit them out and it's a dog eat dog environment, but it is an environment where we expect you to perform at a level that lives up to your potential. And that's what we try and encourage throughout the business, people living up to their potential. But it is a challenge, Hilton, I won't lie. And I have got it wrong from time to time. You're not going to get it right all the time. But generally speaking, I think what we realize is that it's not a sprint. Growth and development's not a race. Even though I hear about millennials and the new generation, everything is quick, quick, quick. It's not a race. There is no substitute for experience. There is no substitute for actually being mentored by people that know how to mentor. Doesn't mean it needs to take forever either. But there is something to be spoken about where you do things in a measured way so that you give yourself and the person you're talking about the best chance of success. And I found that works better than if you just sort of take a scattergun approach and say, I'll throw a dart, few will stick, and those that don't stick, tough luck. I don't think that's a people oriented culture to do that.
I also think there's something about the role modeling that happens in the business because having worked with you for the last 4 years or 5 years, it always stands out how involved you are in all of these developmental processes. Takes a lot of your time, Vishal, and
Mm.
you're always there at every meeting. You do whatever's required. So I think people see, I mean, if you're doing it and you're invested and you taking your time, that investment sinks in for people. So I think people do see
Mm.
that from the leadership, and the value of that role modeling rubs off on those that work with you for sure.
Yeah, and you are right. I mean, it's a conscious effort, but more than that, what I said at the beginning about being authentic and that being one of the key fundamentals of leadership, that's where people make the determination whether you're authentic or not. Because if you do it because it's a tick box, or because you say it's a KPI or whatever, you need to go for coaching, you need to be psychometrically tested, you need to do whatever, and it's just seen to be done as something because they need to say you did it, I think that lessens the impact. And you are right. I mean, part of that journey that the team has gone on is I've gone on that journey with them. So myself, I've grown through that and I've had to learn things about how I take information in or how I share information and how sensitive it is in understanding when you have those more senior roles, what you say carries more weight and it has more impact and it resonates more with people. And that's where, again, being authentic comes in because I'm very honest with my team about the fact that the only person I'm an expert in is in myself. I don't know anything about anybody else that can stand me as an expert, but I'm on the journey with them. And this team that we have at the top, but also within the business, is that team that we are on this journey as a company on with. And we can succeed together if we all understand that we need to pull together and do our part. Because everyone has a different role to play in the organization. And in their career, at each point, it's a different role to play. And if everyone plays their role at the point, but there's always trying to grow, as a company, we enjoy that momentum as well. And that's what we've tried to do across the leadership team. All my leaders are exactly the same.
So, Vishal, the one thing that we see is also, I think, a bit of a universal problem, especially in technical arenas such as engineering, is the kind of transition from operational to tactical and strategic. And when you have engineers who are, whatever, they've been groomed to solve technical problems, that's where they've got all their kudos, they've invested in educating themselves to be the best in the field. And now they have to let go as they become leaders and leave that work to other people. I mean, is that first of all a requirement in your business that like your good engineers have to groom the technical expertise around them to other people and become business leaders of more focused on the future of the business? Or do they carry them kind of together? Do they stay technically and operationally involved, but also become strategic? How does it work?
Yeah, another good question, Hilton. Again, one which we spend a lot of time talking about. Look, we are 104 years old and we've been successful over that time. And that would never have happened if we didn't have a clear idea that mentorship and constant training and development of technical expertise and sharing that across the business is fundamental to our future success. So, to give you a practical example, at the moment in our business, we have someone who's, I think, 90, still involved, still mentoring, still training, but who's been in the business for 60 or 70 of those years and has worked through the industry. We have guys in their 80s, guys in their 70s. So I said to somebody the other day who had just reached the retirement age at KP that for me, retirement is a change of employment contract. It's not a change in value or a change in the impact that you can have. But that has always been a fundamental value of the business in that we keep as much of that expertise around and develop people around us technically. We're constantly looking at, I mean, we call it these days succession, but we're constantly looking at technical development, technical succession, transferring of skills. We have multiple programs within the business at all levels that are mentorship based, but they're technical mentorship as well as professional, which is geared exactly to that, to ensure that there's enough lateral development as opposed to just vertical development within our business. Whether you're the junior who just joined, a mid level who's been in the firm for a few years, or a senior person now that is gearing up for senior leadership roles, that is something that's very consistent. So the answer to that is absolutely, and we do that proactively. This the first question you asked about the operational and then becoming more tactical or strategic, and how do you let go of the day-to-day stuff? That's a very difficult one. I don't believe in pigeonholing anybody, right? You can't become a manager who then says, I don't do any technical work. I'm just here to watch other people and manage the commercial side. Because at the end of the day, we engineers, scientists, and technicians, that's what we're selling. I can't sell something that I don't know anything about, and neither should any senior person in our business. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't times where you've got to choose to spend time on one or the other. But again, that comes back to having created that strength in numbers and that depth of technical competence that allows you to do that. But as with anything in life, in our business, you got to sometimes balance them, and sometimes it's imbalanced. It depends on what the needs and the demands at the time are. But we've created a structure where neither one or the other is the only expected outcome. The expected outcome is that you will do what you need to do to achieve the goals that you've set and that we've agreed that you need to achieve. And you have the freedom to pursue the way to do that from within what the management team looks for and how you measured. I think that gives people much more room to be successful as opposed to pigeonholing them and becoming a technocrat or a bureaucrat. In our business, you neither, you both, and it depends on what the demands are at the time.
Vishal, this is a tough question, I think, but is this kind of how you saw your life at the stage where you at? Did you see yourself as an engineer ending up leading an organization as you are?
I've been asked that question so many times, and I always think sometimes when I give the answer, it's like it was predestined, and there is no such thing in life, right? In my life, my schooling career, high school, varsity, and general personal life, I've always been someone who never shied away from a leadership role. Was always the person that, if there was a problem, got the guys together or the team together and was part of the solution. Maybe didn't always want to be the one who wanted to always have the solution, but I was always part of getting to the solution. And sports teams, I used to captain them and all of that stuff. And it just happened naturally. I just never shied away from it. And when I got into the engineering field and became a graduate and started practicing, even then, whether it was on a project or in the office, naturally, the person I reported to would say to me, Vishal, you sort this out. Vishal, I'll leave this up to you. Let me know. You like this more than I, that kind of thing. And I became the MD of the company at quite a young age. I think I was about 40 years old. And I say to a lot of the young engineers that I speak to now, you are me, but 20 years ago, because I started exactly like you. Fresh
Mm.
graduate coming out of varsity, joining the company as a graduate engineer. No real aspiration at the time to be the CEO, the MD. I mean, when you first join as a graduate, it'll be extremely presumptuous to think that I have a plan, a 10 or 20-year plan to become the MD, right? You might think you have the qualities, you might have lots of ideas that you want to share with the person leading the firm or the leadership team, but you don't really have that plan on day one. But when you talk to people and say, but this is where you can end up, if you stay true to what you always had within you, it becomes a bit more real. And that's what I've seen for me has resonated through the years. And that's what I share a lot with the junior staff that I work with, that it can happen. If you have the attributes when you're a youngster, it doesn't disappear. You just bury them because you think you
Mm.
shouldn't. You can aspire to them, but it's the attributes that you have and staying true to who you are and just growing that can actually take you to where you want to go.
Has the emergence of AI, for example, found a place in your organization? How much do you tap into the latest technological developments and keep your eye on that for the future?
Yeah, that's very topical in the engineering industry, especially, but obviously in any industry these days. And the answer to that question is absolutely. I mean, just the consulting engineering game has moved in the last 40 years from working on drawing boards and doing everything by hand to then in the last 30 years doing everything on computer to now having these sophisticated AI based learning models and design programs that can actually do a lot for you that people think means that you need less people, but actually it's just the tool that's changed. At the end of the day, we are very focused on ensuring that we give our clients a benefit of the best technology, the latest available, software and hardware in the industry. But ultimately, it's still about people. It's still about having the best people you can find and developing them. Developing them with new tools and fancy tools is even better, but it comes down to people. Ultimately, when I talk about Ubuntu and African excellence and the type of business we're creating that is true to our African roots, we are trying to create the best engineer, scientist, technician, technologists we can that is ready then to make a difference in the industry and difference in the marketplace. Whether that means using the latest tools today or 10 or 20 years down the line, that's the responsibility we have to create those engineers that are able to understand doesn't matter what tool you use, you're still designing things that impact people on the ground. You're still designing things that are at people's safety at their core. You're still designing things that can change people's lives. And that attribute is what we spend a lot of time working on and ensuring that our engineers and scientists understand. But yes, The latest technology is important, but quite apart from technology, there's also been a lot of disruption in the people part of life, the people part of management. And that's been some place where we've spent a lot of time trying to not let our preconceived ideas, we all grew up in an environment what was a function of the people that you worked under, a function of the leaders you worked for and the mentors you worked under. So we all have those biases we carry with us. We try to work very hard not to let our biases affect how we view what we need to do going forward from a people management point of view. Whether it's going hybrid, and we went hybrid years before COVID started, where people work remotely, whether it's about how you conceive reward and retention, how do you put that together to staff, whether it's about defining values and attributes and being open about them on day one, but then being true to them and how you manage the firm, whether it's about the silly things like ice cream in the office or fun days on a Friday or whatever. Being progressive about that and not being stuck in the past ideas has been very, very important for us. So, to me, what you asked is both important on the technological side, but it's as important on the people side. And we've tried to be progressive in both without losing who we are. In trying to chase the latest, you can lose who you are because you're trying to become whatever you think you need to be today or tomorrow. We try to stay true to who we are, but evolve with what's changing around us without losing the essence of what we think makes us a unique business in our environment.
Just revisiting the idea, because I think it does link into a lot of what you're saying, how you retain at the moment the skills that you have, which are so sought out. Globally, people are wanting to leave. How do you recommend leaders retain their top talent? What is the magic behind the retention?
I must be careful how I answer the question because I don't have the answer. I just have our attempts at the answer. There's the obvious things: fair reward for effort, good working conditions, you know, sort of understanding that people are human beings with the same challenges that we would have, and giving them an environment where they feel respected and where they feel they are professionally being given the best opportunities to grow and so on. I think those are very common. Most employers would say that. There's nothing unique there. I think the most important thing, and I've tried to be this in our business, and our leadership team has tried to be this. Again, I go back to the word, is to be as authentic and as honest about what we expect, what we're about, and what we're trying to become as we can be from the graduate level right to the top. No staff member in my business, because I talk the way I'm talking to you, I talk to them all regularly, should be confused about what KP is about, what drives us, where we're trying to go, and what our expectations of our staff are. But we're also very open about what their expectations of us should be, because it's a two-way street. They
Mm.
talk about the written contract and the psychological contract and all of that stuff. And I say to the staff very honestly, you must hold us to the same standard that we expect to hold you to. And you should feel free to be able to raise at any level in the firm any concern you have if you think we're deviating from that. Because we might, without realizing it, deviate, or you might not have all the information and make your decision based on what you heard or you think you've heard, and therefore think that we might be deviating. And I think those are as important as the things I mentioned at the top, to retention in the first instance, but also attraction. Because, Colin,
Mm.
the one thing you did say early on is that we proudly proclaim the awards we win. We talk about the firm we are. We don't shy away from sharing the identity we have because we're proud of it. And we're proud to attract people that resonate with it. And as I said earlier, we want people who work for us and with us to feel resonance with who they are and who they are working for. And if they join KP, I want them to feel as if this is who they want to be. Some of the values that we talk about, I want them to feel as if there's no conflict, that they're just doing this for the money.
Mm.
You know, obviously the money must be good. And I think at KP, we're one of the best rewarding companies in the industry. In fact, I think we are the best rewarding company in the industry. But apart from that, apart from the financial reward, I want my staff to feel as if they're working to a higher purpose. There's something behind what they're doing most of the time. When they're knee deep in the trenches and it's 12 at night and they're working towards a deadline, that's going to be the last thing on their mind, of course. But over the course of a year, if you chart it, I would like to think, generally speaking, when they're out there in their social circles talking to their friends or family, they would be saying that they are working for Night Episode because they're proud of what we're trying to do and they feel some sort of resonance. I would hope so. Doesn't mean we're getting it right all the time. I think there's so much more work to be done, but that's what we're trying to do. And that's the type of environment we're trying to create that I think both retains people with the normal attrition rate. I mean, you're never going to retain everybody, but also attracts people that resonate with that. And I've had a few experiences with new hires or people that have joined us who eventually, when they get to talk to me, will say to me, we joined because something somebody said at a conference or something somebody said in an open forum resonated with them. And whether it's technically working to the best level in the industry, or whether it's because we are trying to do more than just make money here, we're trying to make a difference, either one, it stuck with them. And then when they saw the ad or somebody approached them, they said, "Oh, Night Peaceful, I know the firm and I'd like to work for them."
So, Michelle, a few times you've spoken about high performance organizations and kind of the culture. You come in, you work with the vest. And I wonder how you manage the tension between, the great expectations and demand. And, we're just saying people knee deep in spreadsheets till the middle of the night and the work life integration of people. I know that there's a high demand, but you've also got people, and as you say, they're human beings, they've got families. How do you have them give their best at work, but also still feel connected to their families and their life outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, there is a balance, Hilton, in everything you've said. There's a balance between driving a high performance culture and creating a culture where people feel as if they're expected to work like 24/7. When we talk high performance culture, we don't necessarily talk about the hours. We don't expect you to
Mm.
work 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I talk high performance culture, I want somebody to be performing at their best when they are at the office or when they are working, because our staff work hybrid. And performing at your best means really giving off your best in every aspect, whether that means in doing the best technical job you do, whether that means being the best project manager, whether that means being the best people manager. I want people to perform at their best. And I want to create an environment, and we try to do this where we keep trying to help people to realize what their best is. And remember, your best changes as you grow. What you thought was your best as a graduate then becomes too little when you become a mid to senior, and then so on and so forth as you go up the organization. And that's what we try to do. So I hear you, and I often hear that as a refrain where people say, but you can't expect too much. And I say, is asking somebody to give me their best 8 hours a day too much? I thought that's what work was. You come to the office and you really give your best because you want to be the best version of yourself. That doesn't mean people don't work extra hours from time to time. It doesn't mean people have to put in, after hours work or weekend work when it's required. And I understand that. But at the same time, as I said, that psychological contract we have with our staff is if we are expecting them to perform at their best all the time, they expect us to give them our best as a company all the time. So that pressure is two way. So what you said actually applies in reverse to the organization as well. We, as the leaders of the organization, are under some sort of pressure to always try and create an environment which gives our staff the type of motivation they need to perform at the levels they need to. It's not just one way. And that balance to me, where both of us are trying to give of our best, both the organization and the leaders running it and the staff that work within it, has allowed us then not to become disassociated from the realities of individuals' lives. And things like working hybrid. Hybrid to me is not that you have to be at your desk 8 to 5, whether you're at home or at the office. It means that in a 24-hour period, you work your time around whatever the constraints or realities of your life are. And I found that we went hybrid in, I think, 2018, 2019. I found that that has helped people find that balance for themselves without compromising their delivery or compromising their growth or compromising living up to their potential. It's not perfect. Some people can't work at home. Some people can't stay disciplined enough out of the office environment. And some people love working at home because they don't have to deal with traffic. They don't have to dress up except for the face and so on. So I think that we're always trying to find the balance, Hilton, but I always say I want you to know that I want you to be your best. I want to help you become the best version of yourself. KP wants you to be the best version of yourself. That doesn't mean it's always going to be comfortable, it's always going to be easy, or it's always going to be exactly what you think it's going to be. It might be something that is always going to be a little bit of tension, but that tension is growth. When you feel that, you are growing. and you're becoming better at being the best version of yourself. And I think that is how we manage that balance that you mentioned.
Thank you. That was a great answer.
Vishal, what do you do personally to ensure that you have the required balance and integration of wellness and, just being able to recover and reset yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of small things, Colleen. I'm a very spiritual person. So I am in my personal relationship with whatever you call the spiritual energy of the universe. I talk a lot to myself, which means I'm talking to the higher power out there about what I'm dealing with and going through. But quite apart from that, which I think is common with a lot of people, I have a very supportive family and I'm able to talk to my wife and my kids, who, by the way, when I'm home, I'm just dad. I'm not anything leader, whatever, whatever. I am dad, and my opinion doesn't count for much at home. But the home environment is actually the environment where I feel I'm able to de stress the most. I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of physical exercise, but I am inspired quite a bit by what I believe we have the potential to do as a company, and what I believe both me and my leaders have the potential to influence. That's the best energy, I think, because I don't see this as a job. I see this as
Mm.
a mission. We are on a mission to do something. And because of that, the balance that we need to find, and it does have its stressful moments, of course, the balance that I need to find is not hard to reach out to because it's there. And because everything I'm saying to you is who I really am, and I'm very authentic about this, I don't feel like I have to psych myself up to put on this persona to come to the office and sell something. I
Mm.
am this way at home. They just don't listen at home. But I am this way at home as much as I am at work. And that takes a lot of that stress away because I'm not pretending. And I think most successful leaders are the same. When you stop pretending and you are who you are and you're true to yourself, it isn't that difficult to find the balance because you're not switching anything on or off. It's just the audience that's different. But who you are is the same. So able to find that balance quite easily on a regular basis.
Has there been a particular direction of leadership that you've seen evolving over the last decade? Is leadership in 2024 different to the way it was in 2014? And if so, in what ways?
Yeah, Hilton, I need to be very politically correct and watch how I answer the question because right now in the world, there's a huge debate about leadership in the West. There's a huge debate about what is real leadership in the US now, run up to elections, and there are two diametrically opposed views of leadership there. If you look at what's happening in the Middle East, there's a huge separation in what is leadership. Is leadership being the strong man, leadership being the one stopping what's going on? Who's the better leader? The one, I don't want to go into detail there. But if I bring it closer to home, I am, as I said, very proud to be an African. And as such, I'm very proud of African based leadership, African based values determining the kind of decisions you take. And it's not too dissimilar to the Eastern based philosophies as well. They just call them different things, but they're very similar. If you compare that to potentially what a capitalist based leadership framework looks like in a business context, there are some conflicts between the two if you put them side by side. And Colin, you asked the question earlier about how do you balance purpose with profit? You didn't say it that way, but I think that was the question. And in many ways, Hilton, that is the understanding of leadership and the evolution of leadership in a nutshell. Understanding whether it's one or the other, or how do you find a blend of the both. And I found more recently, certainly in this part of the world, and I'm not talking South Africa, I'm talking Africa, there has been a greater understanding of finding a balance between purpose and profit without sacrificing one or the other. I don't know where the West sits because, as I said, I think that right now I really can't make heads or tails of what the ruling leadership philosophy in the West is. And it does make me despondent from time to time because I mean, I talk so often about African values and I do romanticize it a little bit. I know it's not always as clear cut as I'm making it. But if you just went back to Ubuntu principles, we're in this together, there doesn't always have to be winners or losers. We can all get to a point of progression if we understand it from each other's point of view. If you look at it for like that, I think more people are headed in that direction now than ever before, certainly in this part of the world. And that for me is leadership evolution. If you can ever get away from, you have to go to war to get to an outcome as opposed to get to negotiate and collaborate, I suppose
Mm.
the world would be a better place. But unfortunately, life is not like that. And I think as leadership progresses and philosophies continue to grow and expand, maybe we'll get more of that type of leadership progressing through the world. And the world would be a better place if we all try to make sure that everyone, you know, to use the term, everyone won, as opposed to some people
Mm.
win and some people lose.
Yeah, it sounds like a very kind of people centric, benevolent view of leadership. And,
Servant
you know,
leadership.
like, yeah, and then moving away from the more autocratic, whatever, alpha male kind of version of leadership. It sounds like that really works for your organization. And for you in particular, it's got like a very human centric view of working with other people.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. The way you've just phrased it, though, sounds like it's it's like one or the other. No, for me, there's room for the sort of, I don't use the word autocratic, but I'm just using your word. There's room for that. But at the
Mm.
same time, that can also exist in the same leadership paradigm where you're looking at the greater good. And what I said about there doesn't have to always be winners and losers. There can be some people who win more than others, but there doesn't need to be losers. And when you get to some sort of leadership philosophies, it is that I have to win. And for me to win, you have to lose. And that's where I think I differ from that paradigm. But I think both can exist in the same framework. You just got to be mindful enough about it to understand that you got to adjust your definition of winning.
When you look back on your career, which is the leader that stands out for you that possibly you've learned from the most? And what was it about them that maybe helped you to develop into the leader you are?
Thanks, Colin. I think when you ask most people who are in any position of authority that question, some might give you one answer, but there's no one answer. It's at different stages of your life, depending on who you
Mm.
aspired to or who you were mentored by or who you worked with. You took something out of everybody. And that's very true in my case. I mean, as a young adult growing up in the late 80s, early 90s in South Africa, it was a segregated place. I went to a segregated Indians only school back in the day. And at that time, it was sort of just as apartheid was coming to an end and we were looking towards the future. And that's when we started hearing about the struggle heroes of the day who stood for principle and gave up their lives for principle back in the day. And there are many examples of that. And that leading into Nelson Mandela and sort of the talk at the time, it became more prominent in my life, certainly, the talk of the sacrifice, the 27 years, and then the sort of trying to let go of the past and his own past as well as the past that had shaped the country and try and look to the future that you wanted to create. And he spoke a lot about Ubuntu and used Ubuntu principles, talking about the Rainbow Nation and all of that stuff. And then you take that and you go into obviously my parents and my family and my grandparents who would share lots of stories and history and so on were very informative and formative in my leadership sort of journey. Then through school and through university, I was quite active in the student movement at university, trying to get things to be more than just talk about change, to getting married. And my wife was one of my biggest inspirations and one of my biggest influences. I mean, it's amazing what women are able to deal with and to go through. And my wife amazes me all the time with her ability to juggle everything and still look amazing and still sound amazing and still support me amazingly. So that has been a big influence. And then to your mentors at work, I trained under wonderful people, very smart, who taught me a lot of things that I took little bits and pieces off to where I am. And even now, I mean, I have mentors in the industry that I look to who are constantly helping me understand and make sense of the things I'm trying to process along my own journey to realizing how little I actually know, but at the same time, how much there is to learn. And, I haven't named too many people there, but that's because there's so many along the journey to get to where you are. But certainly, I think the journey is ongoing and I'm constantly learning new things every day.
Thanks, Vishal. That's, I think, what you've created there. And I do want to just share a shout out for Mavashni, who we also work so closely with, who is very
Mm.
much your co pilot in driving this organizational culture that you've created a learning environment. I think at the end of the day, people are encouraged to learn about themselves, about their technical skills, about being their best selves, and all done with humility. So Just amazing. Well done. I think it's a great feat given the complexity of your business and the challenges. It's been a tough year, but you've thrived in that toughness. So,
Yeah, I must just add to what you say to say it's the leadership team. We've built
mm,
a brilliant leadership team that is multicultural, ethnically diverse. We've got a Congolese leader, a Zambian leader, a Namibian leader, a Botswana leader, South African leader, and so on. This diverse team that we've built, that have been able to not let the diversity and the different cultural upbringing they have come in the way of us aligning and positioning and understanding how we need to move forward as an organization. That's the beauty, I think, in building and having an African focused leadership team or an African focused leadership philosophy. That's the beauty, in that we all get together and sit down and say, I don't mean literally, but we all sit in a circle and we talk about everything, and we talk about the impact of everything, and we talk about what we're trying to do, and we talk about our different perspectives on the same issue, which are not all a South African perspective or whatever. It's a perspective based on our different positions and upbringing and so on, and then sort of coalesce to where we need to go. I am the leader. I do obviously make the final decisions and so on, but those decisions are often a result of this crowd we get together in and sit and put our heads together and come up with the best way forward. And again, that is that whole Ubuntu philosophy in action, where everyone might not agree with the final outcome, but everyone understands it, but also can contextualize it in how it helps us get to where we want to go as an organization.
I've got a last question, Vishal, and I often find myself talking in various conversations about how I see one of the most important priorities of the CEO is to look after the culture of an organization. If you think of all the directions that you pulled in with your priorities, the entrepreneurial side, the technical side, the stakeholders you deal with, how much does culture come up in conversation? How much do you find yourselves talking, like directly focusing on the aspects of culture?
Yeah, Hilton, I think you're right. It is one of the most important building blocks of sustainable success, but also of consistent success in any organization. Our organization is no different. As I think through this course of this conversation, I've spoken about the values that we believe define our culture. Now, those values aren't just for managing people, they're also for managing clients, managing projects, managing our stakeholders out there in the industry. And it comes up every day in every conversation, in everything we have to decide, in every decision, all the time. And sometimes, because it's now, I hope, ingrained in a lot of certainly the leaders, it's not even an awareness that we're talking of culture, right? It's just become part of the foundation with which we believe we make decisions in the business. So, absolutely correct. It happens all the time. And I think a good culture in any business is one where you're able to not talk about it in the context of a conversation about culture. It is part and parcel of what you're talking about all the time. And I think we strive to achieve that. And we're better at it now than we were before, but we've got a long journey ahead to get to where we need to be.
thank you so much. I guess we've already run over time. It's been a fascinating journey just to connect with what's important and what matters for you in leadership. And I've certainly learned a lot. Any wrap up comments, questions from anyone?
No, thanks. It's just been fascinating just, having an hour with you, Vishal, and just hearing about the kind of things that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's very inspiring. So thank you for
Mm.
sharing.
Any books that you could recommend, Vishal, around Ubuntu leadership, African leadership? Because I think people are going to be very interested to read more.
Yeah, there are a number of books, Colleen. At this point in time, a lot of them escape my my
That's
recollection
fine.
in terms of their titles, but I will share them with you. You know, I know I'm speaking about Ubuntu leadership, but the other, just to show you, Hilton, when you're talking about leadership styles and how the leadership styles melt together, the other principle that we look at quite carefully in our business and books we followed is Jim Collins' writings. Jim Collins, everyone knows Good to Great, Great by Choice, How the Mighty Fall, all of that stuff. We've looked at that and adopted some of those principles in our business, but counterbalance that with the fact that we also an African business, we believe in Ubuntu, and we're striving to make a difference that's wider than just the bottom line. I find that a lot of those principles are interchangeable. What differs is when you start talking about what drives the value system and how the values drive the decision making in the organization. We found we've been able to balance the two in our business and balance it very well. And Colleen, just to answer one question, I have contributed a chapter recently to a book where I speak about a lot of this. I'll share the title with you. I think it's out. I
Okay.
can't remember now. For me, I believe very strongly in the value of African centered leadership and Ubuntu based decision making. I'm not saying it works everywhere. I'm not saying it's the answer to everything. But I think that when you get down to its base level, it actually has the potential to make everything more successful for more people as opposed to just for the bottom line.
Great. That brings us to the end of this incredible conversation with Vishal Haripersad, where we learned the power of leading with authenticity and the essence of Ubuntu in organizational culture. A huge shout out to our guest for sharing his wisdom and stories with us. We'd also like to express our gratitude to our producer, Sia, for the hard work behind the scenes. And of course, a big shout out always to our co host, Hilton Rudnick, for bringing his insightful perspectives. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor, like, share, and subscribe to Radio Omnicore. It helps us to keep bringing you more of these amazing conversations. We're always grateful for your support and the fun we have together on this journey. And until next time, keep leading with purpose and compassion. Thanks for tuning in.